A collection of regrets. The gallery opens. Inside, dark walls and spotlights. Displays arranged next to one another, all empty, and yet one heavier than the next. Sharp turn to a room filled with crumpled paper and dreams, dead before reaching the stars or even the walls. An entire exhibition of what could have been but never will. Conceptual art of the soul, equally hard to understand or accept as art at all. It's not a pipe, but it is, or a fountain. No, this is the largest collection of all. The collection of regrets gathered from every person looking back, wondering why they didn't take a chance. Why did they let fear win? Except this art won't go for millions in the next auction. These pieces will remain untouched, gathering dust and painfully poking you every chance they have. Some, I'm afraid, couldn't fit in this gallery, but they still live in the back of our minds, weighing us down at every chance they get. Welcome to the Memento Mori Lab podcast. I'm Myra, your host and aspiring creative friend. The more I sit with my own thoughts and feelings, the more I realize how many regrets I've collected over the years. Particularly regrets of not doing things, as opposed to regrets of something I did wrong. The regrets that sit with me are all the chances I didn't take. Naturally, I thought maybe I'm just obsessing over this, like I usually do. Though that might still be the case, in talking to others, I've noticed that most people carry their regrets around too, at the tip of their tongues. The sentence usually goes like this: I wish I had done X when I had the chance. I wish I tried that when I was younger. If only I had taken the chance. Are you familiar with any of those? You probably thought about a couple of things you wish you had done in your past, right? Regardless of how old you are. Okay, maybe not if you're very young, but okay, other than that, I'm sure there's something you regret. The worst part is that as we get older, it seems like the pile of regret just keeps growing taller. Instead of learning from this feeling of unease, of all the I wish I had and I should haves, we just keep doing the same shit. Not only do we regret the things we didn't do yesterday or the day before, but we also have all those accumulated regrets from all the years we've been alive. Carrying all of that around is too heavy. Then a new day comes and the pile is already there. Like the pile of laundry, we keep moving from one place to the other instead of washing it. The new day could be a clean slate for us to do something great, but it ends up having all these strings of expectations attached, and we can't move forward. We want to resolve all the regrets of all the years we've been alive in one tiny day. It's overwhelming. When the day's over, we realize we did nothing. So we quickly add a couple more items to our endless regrets pile. How can we ever expect to win this internal warfare? To make matters worse, everywhere we turn, all we hear is stop dwelling on it. It's no use crying over spilled milk. It's useless. You can't go back in time. Stop torturing yourself. Move on. Get over it. And so many other variants. I know all that, and rationally, I would love nothing more than just move on. But that's not how my mind works. So all those affirmations just makes me feel inadequate and are counterproductive, to say the least. Regret, like any other emotion, can't just be ignored or pushed away at will. Accepting it as part of our lives is the first step to finding some peace with it. We need to accept that we are bound to experience regret, given the huge number of choices we face every day of our lives. Every day we wake up and we can do 1,000 different things. We can take action towards some dream or goal, but we can also choose entertainment instead, like Netflix or whatever. Sometimes we have had a hard day, so all we want to do is rest our minds, feel nothing, and just be distracted. Regret is always related to choices. The regret of a mistake you made is usually because you feel like you made the wrong choice. Then there is the regret of inaction, which is the one that we're talking about here. That is a decision that you made not to do something, usually out of fear. We are faced with different choices all day long, and I think we talked a little bit about this in the decisions episode, but the thing is, we can only make a limited amount of decisions a day, of smart decisions, that is. We get tired and go on autopilot and start making decisions that we might later on regret. So sometimes we choose to watch Netflix instead of working towards something important to us because we're just exhausted. There's a philosopher called Kierkegaard. Yes, here I go again with my philosophy 101 that I learned on YouTube. Bear with me here. He talks about these impossible choices and he discusses his theory of either or. His thing was that we regret if we do and we regret if we don't. He says something along the lines of, laugh at the world's foolishness and you regret it. Weep over it and you regret it too. I guess it's like damned if I do, damned if I don't. He also talks about angst, this feeling that we have when we understand all the choices we have to face and at the same time how little we know how to make them wisely. And so he says, quote, life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards, end quote. I think this is a great point because we always find things that we could have done better or could have gone differently. But we need to keep it moving. Whether we did something or didn't, we can't change the past, but we can change the future based on our past experiences. Living with this constant feeling of regret about things that we didn't do is painful, but we can use it as fuel if it's painful enough. The pain we feel should be the catalyst for us to make a change. Regret is painful, and so is changing. We need to consciously realize that the pain of regret will only grow while the pain of change fades away. The first few steps will be harder, but soon we adapt, and the change that seemed impossible becomes routine. It's not easy, but if we can internalize that, we can start taking action so that the pile of regrets stop growing so damn fast. One of the reasons we experience regret is to help us make better decisions in the future. So whenever we make a mistake, we regret it, then we learn not to make that same mistake again. But when it comes to regretting things we didn't do, for some reason we don't learn as fast. And we regret it more, because when we regret a mistake, we find ways to make it right, or we can often justify the mistake to ourselves. If we regret not doing something, we feel like we can't do anything now to make it right, and we don't have a justification for it. These kinds of regrets are often tied with unaccomplished goals that tend to linger in the back of our minds. And here's a poem about that. Torture. Regrets drip in the back of my mind all the time, like a broken faucet. No matter how tightly I turn, it keeps on leaking just the same. I try my hardest to avoid it, I do, but the sound of each drop grows louder until I can hear nothing else. It's torture. Meanwhile, no one else hears anything at all. In thinking more about regret and reading random things online, I came across the idea that regrets usually revolve around unjustified decisions. If we made a wrong decision in the past, but it was justified by who we were at the time and we had our reasons for it, we don't regret it as much. We accept it. But if we chose a path that went against who we are or the reasons we had at the time, then it's a different story. For example, if you chose a career because your parents wanted you to, you went against who you were or what you wanted. You also probably won't have enough reasons to justify it, so you end up regretting that decision. I think this also goes to when we talk about the regrets of not doing things. Looking back in my life and my pile of regrets, not doing the things I wanted to do went against who I was because I was either trying to please others or afraid of being me. The fears were many. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of disappointing other people, fear of not being good enough, fear of being ridiculed, and I could go on for days. The point is, I wasn't being myself, and thinking about it now, I can't justify my inaction, so the regret grows stronger each day. Does that make sense? Obviously, regret isn't a joyful feeling, and I understand people's reaction in trying to shut it down. I do. I've tried that for many years, but it hasn't worked for me. The thing we often forget about our emotions is that they are usually trying to tell us something. We might think that now the moment is gone to do whatever it is that we regret not doing when we were younger, but that's not entirely true. If you've listened to previous episodes, you know by now that I'm about real stuff here, not fairy tales. So this is not me saying that we can all do whatever we want to do and we will all achieve our goals. But that being said, there could still exist a version of what you wanted to do. The internet is our oyster. There's always room in life for hobbies. So why not pick up a new hobby based on an old dusty regret? Our regrets can serve as a compass to show us what we want to do in life. Maybe at first it's just a hobby you spend a little bit of your time on. And who knows, someday your hobby can become a second source of income in some way and eventually even a job. But not a boring job that you hate, hopefully. Like a fun, good, healthy, happy job. And if it doesn't, that's great. Enjoy the hobby, the process, the exploration. We don't know what could happen, but we know that even if it feels like it's too late, finding ways to address our regrets can lead us to a happier life. Maybe you take a course on something you're interested in or find an online group that does whatever it is you want to do. The point is to take action. This is the only way to prevent us from drowning in our own pool of regrets. Before this gets too optimistic, let's go to another poem. The water. I've always loved the water. I could swim for hours on end until my hands would age and my lips would turn purple, while others stood wrapped in towels. I remember diving in the deep end of the pool, holding my breath for as long as I could, just to touch the bright blue vinyl floor, until I had to kick it back up for air. A pool, despite how deep, is shallow. In the ocean, I was never so brave. I could never reach the bottom and back. I liked the waves and the motion, but the mystery of what crawled underneath made me choose the pools instead. The ocean was never so tamed. One look at it and I would get lost for hours. My feet were always unsure of the next step, and my life's reflection is just the same. I chose shallow waters over depth every time. This poem came about as a reflection of my past and all the regret that I feel. I was always a dabbler in things, which in part I'm happy about because I got to experience many things. On the other hand, I wish I had dared to dive deep into one thing to see where it would have led me. The way I see it, sitting with our regrets can lead to a self-pity parade and end up in a painful bottomless pit. Or, if we truly reflect on it, it can be the starting point of a self-directed change in course. It doesn't have to be a sharp turn that makes things roll everywhere around in the ship. It can be a gentle, slow, and steady turn, as long as we take conscious action towards what we want. Me and my metaphors. I've got so many of them, but you get the idea, right? Sometimes we fear taking action because we feel like it's not the right path. It feels kinda dumb, like, oh, you're gonna start drawing now. Really? You're gonna take acting classes in your 60s? Since we missed our past opportunity, now we are just too old to learn anything new or try anything different. We need to remember that, first, the people judging us aren't the ones living with the regret later on. So why should we take their opinions into consideration? That includes the little voice in our heads. The voice isn't the one suffering. We are. The second thing to consider is that everyone's path is different, and you are taking your own, or better yet, building your own. I couldn't end this episode without mentioning the poet Robert Frost and his poem, The Road Not Taken. He tells the tale of someone facing a decision between two paths. I'm not gonna read the poem here because I don't know how these copyright stuff works, but here's how it ends. So, spoiler alert, if you want to read the entire thing, don't listen to this part. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. In the poem, he doesn't talk about right or wrong paths. The path he chose made all the difference because I think each path would have shaped him differently. Wherever we are now and whoever we are now is directly linked to the choices we've made in the past. Even though we have these regrets, we also don't know if we would truly have been better off had we done something different. If this is the path that you are on now, why not take advantage of it and take action? And if you're not happy with the path, this is the time to start slowly turning a different way. It might be a bit uncomfortable at first, but it will not hurt like regret will as we get older. That's for sure. What is it that you always wanted to do and regret not doing? What does a version of that look like now? Hit me up on Instagram and let's chat. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. If you know anyone living with regret, maybe share it with them so they feel less alone. That's it for today's episode 13th, which is great because Halloween was yesterday, so it was 31st of October, and he asked for a 13, but he drew a 31 for the fans of The Offspring out there. Thanks for hanging around till the end. See ya.